It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Chloe Abedin-Kruskol. Chloe first became involved in social justice at age 15, in which she volunteered at a camp for children and families affected by HIV/AIDS. She then created a fundraiser at her high school benefiting the organization that is still in effect today. Chloe received her BA in Liberal Studies with a minor in Sociology from Sonoma State University and her master's in Social Work from the University of Southern California, in which she was selected to participate in the Department of Mental Health's trauma-focused cohort, concurrent with her social work degree, because, when you're working on one master's, you have plenty of time to do another. Chloe received her master's in nonprofit management from Hebrew Union College, in which she focused on disruptive innovation in the nonprofit mental health world. Chloe initially worked in various community mental health spaces, focusing on court-mandated clients and partnering in various law enforcement offices to bring trauma-informed services to LA's most vulnerable populations. Through this work with both adults and youth suffering from serious and persistent mental health disorders, as well as intergenerational substance abuse, Chloe was able to bring her experience studying epigenetic trauma to the front lines of LA. Chloe then decided to move to the private sector and bring her skills to those experiencing transgenerational trauma to support the community that she grew up in. Chloe's passion and commitment to helping adolescents and young adults struggling to fully individuate stems from her work spearheading family programming within the LA Jewish community for over 8 years. Chloe's approach to helping young adults unpack how their early trauma has led to maladaptive coping is based in psychodynamic theory, mindfulness, dialectical behavioral therapy, and a family systems approach. So in case it's not obvious, Chloe is a badass go-getter, but don't let her bio fool you into thinking she hasn't experienced adversity herself. Also, side note, we're really good friends, so I was just super excited to have her on as a guest, and you'll find out quickly that we are kind of scheming up some sort of plan where we might be putting on more conversations aside from her sharing her own personal story. But that kind of leads me to, we didn't have a lot of time for her to talk about the specifics of the work that she's doing at launch centers, so I wanted to use this as an opportunity to invite any parent out there specifically to consider reaching out to her and signing in for the parent support group that she leads every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for parents with young adults and teens in the mental health and recovery world. It is completely open, so you do not need to be a parent tied to launch centers, just a parent seeking support. It's free. It's totally up to you whether or not you want to participate, but Chloe loves to connect with parents and young adults in need and is always happy to discuss potential treatment options. She is a direct connection to admissions through Launch Center and is always available to connect via email. So you can just find her email address in the podcast show notes. So this is a long intro, but I think the exciting piece is you will find that we are go in this conversation because there is a lot that she wants to share about her journey and the work that she's doing. So let's not wait any longer. Let's get straight to the interview with Chloe on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Thank you for carving out time in your so busy schedule to sit down and chat with me and talk about yourself, which I know you don't love doing. So thank you again for doing this.
Oh my God, of course. Anything for you, Joanna. If you said you wanted me to perform a ballet, I'd pull it together for you, girl.
Oh my gosh. Okay, the follow-up for this is us doing a ballet routine together. I'm holding you to it.
Love it. Well, I feel very honored to be part of this conversation.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think what I want the listeners to know right out of the gate, obviously, is that Chloe was thrilled to be asked to be a guest, but was also really transparent saying, I don't really talk about myself. So this is going to be a learning curve for both of us. But most importantly, I think what I am excited to hear, and I'm excited for you to share for the listeners, is a little bit of your own story, because, we work with young adults there's a lot that's going on, and there's a lot that you think at 18, how your life will be, and it plays out differently. And then I really want to highlight the work that you're doing because I'm viewing you as an expert in the field. Another reason why, kind of sidebar comment, I adore working with Chloe because I think that you have a very special and direct and knowledgeable approach in working with families. And I want to make sure that we actually give you the platform and space to talk about that work that you're doing.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. Outside, I would prefer to talk about that versus myself, but I'm happy to share my story if it helps listeners.
Well, let's do that. Why don't you share what you feel comfortable with about kind of your own emerging adult experience leading us up to how did you get to where you are today? And obviously, even asking that question, when you were 17, 18, did you think that what you would be doing is what you're doing now? So I always want to ask that.
So I'm one of those anomalies. I think I said that right. Anomalies that knew exactly what I was going to do at 16. And while I did not get into the college that was in my perfect plan, and I'll share that story briefly, I knew what master's program I was going to do. I knew what specialization I was going to do. And I did it. So I'm one of those weird people that I'm very lucky I'm very lucky. And also no one wants to grow up the way that I did in the same vein. Both of my parents are phenomenal therapists, and then they got divorced and married other phenomenal people in the field. But imagine sitting at my dining room table when you've got 4 therapist parents in the mix. Needless to say, I learned about danger to harm before I probably learned geometry or danger to self, danger to others, before I fully understood geometry. So in one sense, people look at my story and they're like, oh, really traditional education. You grew up in Agora, you had tutors, you're fine. And then when you kind of get into it, you see that I am successful now because of the non-traditional route of success that I got to. And I say a lot, so feel free to cut me off at any point for us to pivot. But I will never forget, and I still have it because back then you had to wait until midnight when college results came out. I will never forget when my best friend and I applied to the same school and we were planning to room together, and she got in and I didn't. Or we both got rejected. Then we both went through the appeals process. She got in and I did not get it. And I had decided that everything had ended and that none of the other schools that I'd gotten into were the right school for me. My sister was very academically successful traditionally. I had an IEP in high school. I had a lot of medical stuff that flared up in high school and then in my first job that actually prevented me to go to grad school. And I had another really serious medical situation that actually recently forced me to stop working for about 5 months. So I will never forget that moment of, oh my God, my perfect Agora life is not going to get me to my perfect school. And I really had to I ended up going to an amazing school, Sonoma State University. It was absolutely the right school for me, but it wasn't a UC. It wasn't a Harvard, this and that. And I I grew up in a gossipy, rich town where people have too much time on their hands. And it felt like a knife in my heart. But through that experience, I actually discovered that I had so many more opportunities at a smaller school to make change than I would have at a bigger school, because knowing me, I got right involved in social justice and all of that. And by the time I graduated, I was the director of special projects at one of the social justice organizations at my school.
Wow. So as you're talking to, I'm thinking about look, the 16-year-old Chloe that had a plan. It's not that the end result, you didn't differ from that, but
no, not at all.
The path to get there certainly adjusted. And it sounds like it wasn't even necessarily any of it was really in your control, because you're talking about college admissions, which is obviously out of your control, and it's very subjective who and what gets admitted when. And then when you've got medical issues, we can't predict that stuff. And you can do the best that you can to get connected to the right resources, but at the end of the day, you have to focus on yourself. The plan is going to, again, potentially be put on hold because you have to take care of yourself. So having any type of medical issues obviously is going to derail any type of path or timeline that anybody has.
Oh, yeah. And for me, and I'm sure you see this, we see this with clients that we share, so much of it was connected to my mental health. So over the years, I got different diagnoses and it correlated with my mental health. And it wasn't until the past probably year and a half that I got the right mental health diagnosis and then the right medical diagnosis. And it had turned out that I had inflammation in my brain. It's called cerebellumitis. I had inflammation in my brain for at least 15 years. And no one knew because it was coming out in migraines or stomach issues or anxiety or passing out. And I think it's all part of the plan. It got me to where I'm supposed to be. And I fucking love my job and it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. But there were so many turns that I was like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm going to get fired from this job. Or I had to stay longer working at a hospital because they were covering my insurance and nobody knew what was wrong with me. So I couldn't get to grad school at the time that I thought that I would. But looking back now, I got married before 30. I got licensed before 30 and I have a small private practice. So like you said, the end goal of 16-year-old me never changed, but it was the individual kind of steps to get there that did change. Do I have time for my very short SAT story? Because I know we want to get to the professional stuff. So this is one of my favorite stories to share, and I share it with clients. I share this as much as I can because I think it's such an important story of what you were saying about you can have all the right resources and it doesn't always matter. So I was very lucky that I grew up with lots of resources that if I was struggling in math, I got a tutor. If I was struggling in dance, they scheduled me a private lesson. So my parents, because they wanted me to do well, I believe is the root of it. And just so our listeners know, I have an amazing relationship with my parents. Joanna knows this, but I talk openly about all of our shit, but we are so close. They are usually the people that I've recently called. So my parents really had best of intentions and they hired me a tutor. I took a baseline SAT. I couldn't even tell you what I got, but it was terrible. And they were like, okay, great. Well, you're going to meet with a tutor 4 to 5 times a week. So in addition to everything that you're doing in 11th or 10th grade, whenever it was, I was meeting with this tutor every day. And then I took the SATs and I did this for 8 weeks and I got 100 points worse. And it used to be like this big point of embarrassment. And now I tell it as a story of exactly kind of what you're going for with this podcast of the A+B model does not work for everybody.
Right. Oh my gosh. And you just think about obviously we're in the mental health field and we feel like, I love how you said best of intentions, but what ended up happening probably is you were so stressed out to perform.
And I was crying and throwing tantrums and not wanting to meet with the tutor, but my parents had already paid from it. And I don't blame my parents. I don't have kids, but if I was in their situation, I would be like, fuck, I got to get my kid to college. Meeting with the tutor is the only way, instead of looking at it of, is there schools that Chloe wants to apply to that maybe don't focus so much on SATs because that's not Chloe?
Yep, perfect example. Okay, so you rattled off all of the tickers. Here's the marks that I have achieved up to this point. Here is how I'm experiencing success before the age of 30. But one of the things that you left out is this little side gig, and I say little, which probably takes up a lot of time, as the family program manager at launch centers. So was that something that you were thinking about? Like, hey, at some point I'm going to be the family program manager for a young adult treatment program. Was that in the journey?
That actually wasn't. I always knew I wanted to work with families because I just had this feeling that I wasn't getting as much as I wanted out of an individual therapeutic relationship. In the sense of I like to think big. So I, at 16, wanted to open a nonprofit and things like that. And now that I'm in the world, I don't know if a new one needs to be started, but I think me and you should be running one eventually. So that piece wasn't particularly part of the plan. Public mental health was always a big part of the plan. And that's where I got a scholarship and stipend. That's where I did my internship hours training. And that's where I did actually all of my clinical hours. So my plan was actually to stay in public mental health. And I think I didn't want to admit how much it was burning me out. Like pretty much every human that I talked to. I don't know how my dad worked in public mental health for 40 years and he never left. He always had a very like 1 or 2 private practice, but otherwise whole world was public mental health. And I should probably note my parents met working in public mental health. So it's always been a big part of like my history, my story, my origin story type of deal. And I have to give credit to our couples therapist for the reason that I am now at Launch. It was in the middle of the pandemic, but when people were starting to go kind of back, we weren't fully on lockdown anymore. We were slowly starting to go back. And I, as an essential worker, was first round vaccinated, all of those types of things. And I was incredibly bored at work. I had kind of just met the capacity of what the agency could do. And even my supervisor was saying, even if you move up to program lead, I can tell this isn't what kind of gets you excited. And it was working for the government. So there wasn't a lot of creativity and a lot of thinking outside the box. When you think about Launch, it's literally the complete opposite. So my couples therapist was kind of pushing me to look for a different job and kind of identifying as well, you're clinically bored, you can do more. So without me knowing, she contacted Jose, who's the CEO of Launch Centers, and apparently said, I have someone great for you. I think you should try and get her to work for you. He called me and said, would you be open to running groups? And at the time I didn't have a private practice. I just asked him about the hours. And I said, I don't think it'll work with my current job. And his response was, leave your current job, come work for me. And in a 20-minute phone call where I had never heard of Launch, seen Launch, any of those things, really was only familiar with the treatment world with my own experience. And I'm happy to talk about that. I'm very open that I am both a provider and a consumer in the treatment world. And in 20 minutes, he convinced me to do an interview. And that interview with Stephanie McDonald and Cammie and all these people who I did not know were like firing questions at me. And in the, Jess hadn't been hired yet. So in the interview, Jose goes, I think you should be our clinical director. And I said, I don't think I'm qualified for that. And I remember calling my dad going, I don't think I should take this job. This doesn't seem like an agency that's been here for a very long time. They could go under at any time. And then in a week, I had started there and had never actually been to the facility. And they had me do like an emergency intake for someone because I started there 2 days after I passed my LCSW final exam. So they had me do like an emergency intake for someone like a couple days before I was actually supposed to start. And she was the first client in my private practice, but she was my first Launch client. And she goes, do you know where I'm supposed to go after this? And I said, I don't even know where you are. I said, I've never been to the facility, but I'm sure you can go find someone.
Oh my gosh.
And that was about 2.5. We're coming up on 3 years in May. It'll be my 3rd anniversary there.
Well, and just like for those who are only listening to this on audio, you can hear the excitement and the passion in Chloe's voice because totally. If you experience burnout in any industry, right? Or just feeling like you are not challenged, you have hit your ceiling, you just like, we can hear it in your voice. We not only see it in your expressions because you're just really almost borderline depressed, right? Like, This is what I'm supposed to do. Like, where am I supposed to go from here? So as you were just talking about that, like literally onboarding, which I kind of view as the fire hose to the face of like, yes. Not only is it happening that way, but I'm choosing to quite quickly without having ever like met these people, seen the facility, which is brave. That was such a brave thing to do.
I didn't even know, Joanna, it was an IOP PHP. That's literally how, and like I had been to an IOP PHP, so it wasn't like I was new to the world or anything. All I knew was that it was a treatment center. When I got there, I said, how long do the clients usually stay here? Because I didn't even ask that in my interview. And I remember, I think it was Meg being like, oh yeah, we're short term. You know, we have a lot of turnover. And in my head, I went, you only have to be here for a year, then you can leave. I get excited going to work. I think you know how much I like it now. There's no thoughts about me leaving. And if anything, it's how can I grow the program and convince them to give me more money?
Yeah. Well, I'm even thinking about just like it really is the perfect blend of it's creative enough, or you have the autonomy to kind of create and continue to build and grow, which is how we as providers, don't get burned out, but also just want to show up, continuing to not just do the work for the clients, but just be excited about the work that you're doing, which is what we all need to be doing. And then it also allows you to have your own private practice, which allows you to continue to keep your toe kind of dipped in that private practice pool, which again, just kind of like the best of all of the worlds, where you as a child of therapists, becoming a therapist yourself as a provider and a consumer, just like it keeps you alive.
Exactly. And the funny thing now is for so long, I wanted to just be like my parents, like say I have these clients or these crises or these things. And now me and my parents share clients, but I'm the one referring them. So it's so funny how the roles have changed. All typically, like you said about my private practice, when I can, I love to be able to keep families, and it's really more on a check-in. It's not in a consistent basis. It's more of a, okay, now you've transitioned out of treatment. How you doing now? Okay, you're going back to school. How you're doing now? So I'll usually refer either the client or the parent to my dad to do kind of the individual, or sometimes my mom. And then I'm the one that just gets to kind of check in, and I'll call my dad or mom and say, so how's so-and-so doing? And it's like, it's so full circle from me sitting at the dinner table being like, please tell me anything about what you did today. I don't care about HIPAA. I just want to know.
That is awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the family programming, because we have a couple more minutes, and I just want to know really like this is the spicy topic. Because
that is so funny that you said that, because I'm working right now on a presentation called "Making Groups Spicy with Family Integration" for the staff at launch. So perfect. Let's jump into the spicy.
All right, so it's spicy. We're jumping into the spice. What is it from your perspective? What is it that families miss the most, like in terms of missing the mark when they are looking at, here's my child, and we can use launch as the example because obviously this is what you're working with. But when a young adult comes into launch, what is it that are you seeing from the parent perspective where they're missing the mark of how family integration is important for the overall treatment? We won't call it success, but we'll just call it growth through treatment.
Process, growth, coming out of it alive, all of those things. And, I think it's so interesting. Obviously, we're talking about launch because that's my specialty, but I work with a lot of young adults at the synagogue that I work at as well. And I would say it's the same. It's just the intensity that lands you in treatment versus the intensity of individual therapy. And typically, I would say it's kind of twofold, and feel free to redirect me if I'm going off on a path. But the first thing that I would see, and I feel like I have this phone call probably 10 times a week. So if you're a parent listening to this isn't about you. It's about all of you, is the difference between discomfort for your child and an intervention where you need to step in because your child can't handle what's in front of them. And I notice I didn't say anything related to safety, because I find that parents are very good at telling me when their children are unsafe. And usually by the time they've gotten to me, they've been through a few rounds of something. So they're able to tell really quickly, hey, my kid needs to go to the hospital. But what's more interesting is the sweet spot of discomfort. And I think we've seen this with plenty of clients that we've worked with. When a client is faced with boundaries that they haven't been faced with before, whether it's doing chores in a sober living, showing up to program every day, completing the 12 steps, doing an apology, they are so used to their parents writing the excuse note that when they're faced with that boundary, and usually it's related to work, school, or now you need to do something, they throw these large tantrums, and the parents mistake that for a crisis. This is where I love to use the language that I learned working at Cedars-Sinai. Your urgency is not my emergency. And I can't tell you how many times I try to go over that with parents, that I'll get parents calling me saying they're sitting in their room at sober living and they're miserable and they're saying that they hate me. Okay. It sounds like your child's uncomfortable with the fact that they can't go home on Saturday. No, this is ruining everything. And then I kind of have to go to are they dying? Do they need to go to the hospital? So that's one piece of it. And I would say the connecting piece to it is they, from a place of love, just like my parents came at me from a place of love with 4 days a week tutoring, is everything becomes about the identified patient or the child. And when I go to, how are you taking care of yourself? Or you must be so tired. It's, no, fix my kid. The third piece, and they all go together, I promise, is, and I do feel like the world is doing a much better job of this than even they were doing 5 years ago, is the presence of intergenerational trauma. And particularly, I feel like I see this more on the substance abuse side, but I've been seeing it a lot on the people-pleasing side as well, of we'll get these families and the families will say, I have no idea how my kid ended up addicted to, I'll just use a simple one, alcohol. And then I'll start exploring, well, is there alcoholism in your family, mom? Oh, never me, because my mom was an alcoholic. Well, how is it living with your mom who's an alcoholic? We don't have to talk about that. How does that relate to my kid? So those are kind of the three things that, and I can weave them in a little bit more if needed, but it's the safety versus discomfort, which is actually what I'm reviewing tonight in parent group, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Just email me. It's a Zoom group.
Open to anybody. That's what you're saying. That was the slide in there. Okay.
Yes, it is open to any parent who's concerned about their kid. You can either have gone through launch, you can be kicked out of launch and still come every single time considering launch, or just have a young adult or even a teenager that you're concerned about. And it's a free open group that you are welcome to come to. Cool. But those are kind of the things that I see, the lack of focusing on the rescuing, and I need to focus on my kid versus myself. And then the intergenerational trauma piece, not tracing it back to, this didn't start with you, Jimmy. It started because of great so-and-so. And that's what my thesis was about, if we ever want to talk thesis on a different episode. It's called Afraid to Say No, in the intergenerational trauma of people-pleasing and parenting.
Wow. I feel like that just needs to be public for anybody that, has some spare time to do a fun read, because that...
Yeah, you want to read 60 pages? Absolutely.
Right, because we all have so much time to do that. However, I digress. I do feel like that's actually a fascinating topic. So
we could spend a whole, I would love to come back and talk to you about that, because that's my soapbox is that, and my big soapbox right now is hallucinogens and substance-induced psychosis and its relation to intergenerational trauma.
Well, I feel like we're just going to have to end right here. This interview is just about your story leading to where you are, and tune in to part 2 and 3, where we're going to be talking about the areas of expertise, how it is interwoven with intergenerational trauma, specifically to Chloe's thesis and the work that she's doing right now. Like you said, substance-induced psychosis, specifically with hallucinogens. Gosh, I'm a little tongue-tied today. I'm like,
it's okay.
The H's are really hard for me right now.
I couldn't say anomaly earlier.
We're in this together. I love it. Okay, well,
absolutely.
Jokes aside, Chloe, I'm so appreciative of you carving out time to do this. I wasn't kidding. Now that you just kind of planted that seed, we're going to have you back as an expert to talk about those topics. So pay attention when they come out. Chloe, thanks again for taking time to be on the episode.
Of course.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener-supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.